Well, we finally arrived at the final video of this course, and I've got to say, I've really enjoyed it so far. This essay specifically, or this video essay specifically, is probably going to be my favorite. It definitely has been my favorite to work on, to think about. No doubt because I was given something new, very new. I've never watched the film No Exit, which is what we were tasked to watch. It was the BBC's adaptation. And I'll tell you what, it was really, really interesting, very stimulating. I watched the entire thing in 10. And I thought about it. I spent a lot of time. I paused the movie every once in a while and took a walk and tried to organize the thoughts in my head so that I could present a package that I think is indicative of what Sartre is trying to say. And the course requirements specifically for this assignment are to define Sartre's interpretation of hell, explain why we should understand this interpretation, list the 3 big takeaways from the course, and finally explain how these 3 big takeaways may help our own hells be a little more tolerable. So, I've stated before, the film we were tasked to watch is No Exit. And it's an exceptional little film. It's very, small scale, obviously. It doesn't need to be. It catalogs the very short forte into hell that Joseph Garcin, Inés Sereno, and Estelle Rigaud have found themselves in. Of course, they're there eternally, but for us, we only get likely a few months, maybe a few years in totality, from what I was able to extrapolate. And Sartre, of course, uproots the entire concept of hell: the fire, the brimstone, the pitchforks, the explicit pain and suffering, the gnashing teeth, if you will, and replaces it with something profoundly intimate, something very close to us. That's other people. No Exit is a story that takes place in a minimalist room. Can't really describe it in any other way. There's some pieces of art, but it's all soulless. There's no humanity in it. No semblance of actual thought or of organization, of hierarchy. Things are very empty in that room. There's color, but it's kind of described as pretty sickly throughout the duration of the movie. Our first character, Joseph Garcin, is introduced, and he's speaking to the man who enters him into the room and explains the whole situation about being in hell and so forth. And Garcin is taken aback by it a little bit. And he's smart enough to realize the kind of little bits of the beginning of what he'd imagine hell to be. Maybe he thinks it's isolation. Perhaps he thinks it's this very soulless, cold kind of room. Perhaps it's just the nature that the fact that he'll be alone with his thoughts forever. Maybe that's what it is. Until he's introduced to Miss Serrano and Miss Rigaud, who each in their own ways torture one another. I mean that seriously, torture genuinely. The first instance I was able to surmount of, we'll say, the beginning of this torture is when Garcin gives his seat to Rigaud right off rip. This is fulfilling Garcin's immediate, we'll say, masculine requirement to give up his chair for the woman. And I find this very interesting because when Garcin enters on his own, he's allowed to do as he pleases. His face can twitch, and everything like that, and he doesn't have to be anything for anyone. He has to fulfill no narrative. But with the addition of two other people, women no less, he has to act a very specific way. He has to put on a show. He has to put on a mask. And we'll soon realize as time goes on that each of the characters individually are putting on these elaborate masks, these stories they present to the world in life and now even in death. So each of the characters' interactions, this is kind of difficult to go into specifically. I think it's important to go over, so I'm going to go over some of the parts that I think are most indicative to the big conclusion that I'm going to get at the end in describing what Sartre's Hell is fully. One of the most interesting interactions is Cyrano and Rigaud's interactions with one another. Cyrano, of course, is attempting to seduce Rigaud and kind of holds her vanity at metaphorical knife point, becoming her mirror, as she describes it, or wanting to become her mirror, the only mental out for her to fulfill Rigaud's only desire, which of course is vanity for the most part. And Rigaud tortures her back because she'll never love Cyrano. Not that Cyrano necessarily needs the love, but it's the feeling, it's the emotion. It's all about the control. It's an important thing to remember, control. Estelle is bounced between someone who loves her, and she very much doesn't love back, or perhaps someone who's attempting to manipulate her and she has no immediate sexual interest in, and someone who she desires, that being Garcine, and knows that Garcine does not find any attraction to her. Nothing real, of course. And Joseph claims that this hell, this world that they found themselves in, the room, is a pain that, quote, never hurts quite enough. And I really like that quote. I think that one's really good. And why do I think that? I think that the fundamental character, the through line between all of these different individuals is their obsession with control. And Garcine wants to control the narrative about his life. He wants to be perceived as a non-coward, as a hero, as a martyr, as someone who made the right decision. Cyrano wants to be in control of her life, to feel like she has some level of precedence over herself and other people. She's a bad person, but fundamentally, it's about grasping onto it, to feel like you are in control of your life and others' lives. That's what Cyrano wants. And Rigaud wants to be in control of perception, of the way people see her physically. Not through her actions, but physically. She wants the flowing river, the beautiful plaster woman. She wants that persona to be upheld permanently. She wants that to be the person that she's known as forever by young men who she doesn't really even care about. It's again based in control and narrative, and I think that's what Sartre is talking about with hell being other people. We have to understand that we are our lives. We are inseparable from it, whether it's self-actuated or not, whether Zach makes the decisions or not, or whether Zach wills certain actions to happen. Things happen to them and they define his character. And Garcine says he died way too soon, but he didn't have time to be brave enough. That's a very interesting statement to make, because it implies that the world, that life, is separate from the entity, from the us, part of the equation. And that's simply untrue in Sartre's belief. Our lives define who we are. They shape us. And we don't have a lot of precedence over it. The only thing we do have precedence over, truly, authentically, is our capacity to interact with that world. That's it. Not in the way the world interacts with us, but in the way we interact with the world. And what does this mean for hell? This means that hell is not this absurd fire pit, that they cast people into and they feel perpetual physical pain. Hell is other people. Hell is putting on a mask, being non-authentic, hiding yourself away because you have to have control, or you have to be perceived in a certain way. You have to be regarded in a certain way. That's why hell is multiplayer in No Exit. That's why that's the case, why people have to be put into this room with Garcine. Because hell is the epitome of it. It's the stillness, the feeling of being trapped, of every moment being watched, every intimate interaction, every thought, everything being monitored, being interpreted in some way. And we, as humans, we just hate that. Developmentally, we created frameworks for our social structure. We created personas, masks, to push out into the world, to hide our true intentions, to hide our sins, our vanity. And in the course of being in hell, these characters, when they're speaking to one another, finally rip apart those masks and reconcile that, it doesn't matter anymore. Of course, they can never fully regard that. They would probably be complete, and that's not the point of hell. So they can only kind of scratch the surface of it a little bit, but they tear the masks away and they realize all of them are vain messes of people. None of them are good. They're all terrible. I think in a certain way, in the way that Sartre believes it, in some capacity, a lot of us are doomed to hell. A lot of good people are doomed to hell. A lot of people who do good things, I should say, more specifically, are doomed to suffer. And so, Sartre's hell is here. It's on earth. Hell is not a permanent place of damnation like in No Exit, but a transient forte, a little taste of it, every once in a while. When you're trapped at social events and you have to act in a certain way, when you're required to uphold civility and decorum in your conversations, in your intimate interactions, in those small little moments in conversation where you wish to speak the truth, but you don't. That is what he speaks about when he says hell. Hell is disauthenticity, if that's a word. Hell is the lack of truth. Hell is mankind's inclination to hide the truth from himself and from others. And so, what are the big three takeaways from our course on philosophy? And I think these are very relevant to the concept of hell, to defining the concept of hell and reconciling with it, because it's a terribly depressing thought. The philosophical enterprise, the very essence of inquiry, is in pursuit of truth. That's number one. That's the fundamental tenet of philosophy. Why do we philosophize? What's the point? And the point for many people, for most people, is truth. Nebulous truth, to find meaning, to find something, some kind of answer, some narrative that matters, that has a level of precedence to it, truthfulness to it, authenticity to it. It's not made up. Number two, truth does not heed to feelings. This is a terribly brash statement I've made here, but I think it's very important to understand in the process of this course. Truth doesn't care where you grew up. Truth doesn't care who you are, or how you interact with people, or how you like to be perceived. Truth doesn't care about whether or not you feel like you're going to heaven or not, or we'll say heaven in the sense of a philosophical heaven. Truth is truth. It's cold. It's indifferent in its most pure sense. And so when pursuing philosophy, it is in our best interest to remove ourselves, our biases, our proclivity to contort things to the way we perceive the world. It's best to try to reel that back in as much as possible, because truth is not hailent to any of those things, and it never has been. Number 3, we will always assume things, and we will always take leaps of faith and stretches of logic, and we can never truly elucidate reality, truth. And what I mean by that is, we can uncover the attributes of truth. I'm almost certain of that now after taking this course. We can, in some way, take truth and reveal little tiny pieces of it, grains of sand in a desert, if you will. And so, our primary directive as philosophers should not be to come up with the answer capital T, but to reveal, perhaps in our lives, the least absurd leaps of faith and of logic, the ones that we believe are as close to the mark as we can get, because those in some way will be the most authentic, they will be the most truthful. And so, what does this have to do with no exit? As I've stated before, we must acknowledge our occasional fortes into hell, our selective helplessness. We yearn for control, or at least some semblance of it. And yet, we are what happens to us, self-actuated or not, as I've stated before. In this way, we are a collection, a tapestry of millions of different interwoven threads that cross and interlap and sometimes parallel with one another and sometimes split apart and never meet again. And each of these threads, they form our character. There's a million different versions of us that we put out there on purpose or not. And I think that the way the world interacts with us is just as, if not more important than the way we interact with the world. In this way, the modern man must face a choice unprecedented to history. Step forth into that deep, dark, inky void of inquiry, of relentless questioning and acceptance of reality, true reality, however grim or absurd or contradictory to their character or otherwise. Or stay in the box. Stay in the room, like our characters in No Exit. Despite the door being open, despite wishing nothing more but the door to be open when the door is, they choose not to leave. And in many ways, we choose not to leave in our own world. And so, craft something is our second option, no matter how illogical, no matter how absurd, no matter how just out there our narratives can be. Craft one that gives you something, that hands you something of significance. Actually, there was a conversation I had earlier today with some of my friends, and they're exceptional people. They're very intelligent, and their arguments are always very interesting to listen to. They're debates. I shouldn't call them arguments. And one of the things that we came to was, why not just throw our hands up? Why do we have to have meaning? Why isn't the meaning of life happiness, which is something that I fight on quite often? I don't believe it is, and there's a whole host of reasons for that I won't get into, but You know, why is happiness not the primary directive? Why not just fulfill desire? Why is that not the answer? And some people may believe that, truthfully, authentically. But the reason why I don't is because in some way we believe our desire will grant us meaning. We believe that happiness, or the pursuit of it, to chase it in our society, that concept that's the goalpost, that's the end, that's where you go. And in that way, there really is none. Because happiness is a perpetual chase. Interaction is a perpetual chase. Worldly things, Sartre talks about this like mad. Worldly things, those are chases. They're frivolous because there is no end to it. Perhaps that's enough for some people, but it's certainly not enough for me. We need meaning. We lie to ourselves about meaning. We say, oh, well, I'll go and pursue money or something like that, and we chase it. And we believe that that pursuit, whether we have it or not, will be enough meaning to sustain us for our lives. But what if you had to live that moment 1,000,000 times over, 1,000,000,000 times over, an infinite number of times over? Like Nietzsche's eternal reoccurrence. Would you feel the same way about meaning? I don't think so. So when we craft our narratives, we must be very, very, very careful. I don't think it's possible to step forth into that inky void forever, to pursue inquiry relentlessly, to be, how do we say, the aesthetic man. I think Kierkegaard talks about that. Shout out Asher. He spoke to me quite a lot about that. So when we grant ourselves meaning, when crafting a narrative, it is pertinent to us that we recognize hell as the inevitability of our frivolous actions, the end goal. Or then I wouldn't say the end goal, but the end reaction to it. That hell is our interactions with other people, that we live in hell to some capacity, that hell comes forth upon us and that we feel helpless in our situation. But that's precisely the issue. We feel like we're trapped in a box of our own creation, not that we create our boxes that we feel trapped in by our own fruition. That's what Sartre means by it. That's what's so powerful about it, is that hell is created by the people who live inside of it, and not the people or the world around it that's influencing it. In that way, the world makes you who you are through interaction, but you are the one who makes it emotionally resonant. You are the one who makes it hell or heaven or paradise or nothing at all. And so, obsess over vanity, make a fool of yourselves, and live in hell. Do as you please, in Sartre's mind. But you must do it on your own terms. And so in that way, I can't really answer further whether I think one answer is better than the other. But as philosophers, we must consider both options authentically. We must pursue both options authentically, and in those moments, when we feel like we're in hell, we must recognize that our perception, our persona, our masks, our narratives, the things we create, big, broad, streaking narratives and stories about our lives, and likewise, these things, these are our self-actuated hells. They're made by us for us. Problems in this sense, or our lack of feeling in this sense, has nothing to do with the world and everything to do with us. As always, MLA citations, all one of them, is going to be in the description down below, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Good evening.